Another area of performance monitoring optimization is actually has to do with the term reliability. Now with reliability, we're not talking about the same thing we're talking about with performance. Performance is system responsiveness. Reliability is system stability. So how often is the operating system crashing? Well, hopefully not. How often? Hopefully never. How often are applications crashing? Things like that. And so, I may be called upon to troubleshoot some of those issues. Various problems can affect the reliability. Start with memory. Application failures often are in relation to bad memory or damaged portions of a memory chip, maybe just improper instructions or something like that. Operating system crashes and stop errors are typically memory issues. That's why they usually give you a reference to a hexadecimal memory address, and that's where the problem lies. So we can be looking for that. Network, the problems can be a result of just incorrect configuration, a lack of connectivity. We could have hardware problems, device driver issues, and then you have startup issues. That can also be related to memory failures or device drivers or missing or corrupt startup data and files. And we're going to look at startup here in the next section and how we can go through and troubleshoot that. But before we do that, we do have several tools that are related to reliability. You've got Reliability Monitor. Reliability Monitor shows you a chart of system stability. If there have been any crashes, application crashes, device driver failures, operating system crashes, it will be listed. This is a good one to go to compare supposed performance-related issues with system stability. Okay? The two are different. However, it's possible that an issue that looks like a performance issue is actually related to system stability. And so the user is not going to know, and this is just an investigative means that you can use to try to determine exactly what the problem is. You do have a memory diagnostics tool. This was introduced in Windows Vista. This is going to be accessible outside of the operating system using the operating system media called Windows Recovery Environment. And so we can go through and do a scan of the memory chips. It's fairly lengthy depending on how much memory you've got, but you'll do a scan of those memory chips and it's trying to detect errors. Network diagnostics, I believe we've seen. We talked about network connectivity. There are a slew of different tests that you can run there to identify and diagnose those issues. And then you do have the problem reports and solutions tool. The Action Center is now where we're going to go for that. It'll notify me if there are updates that are going to fix previous problems that I've had on the system. So let's take a look at the reliability monitor here. If you just type in reliability, you'll see view reliability history. And we can see then a timeline of events. Some of these events are going to be informational events. Okay? And then others are going to be actual problems. Notice application failures, Windows failures, miscellaneous, and warnings. And it looks like I've got quite a few here, although, oh, that's right. I was trying to remember what this was. You can view the technical details of something. This was the Windows Store for some reason, and I just rebooted the computer, but for some reason a couple of days ago, it just kept stopping. I kept attempting to open it up, and it would just shut right down. And I actually identified, it was very, very flaky, I identified that the problem was actually the time. It just reminded me once again, so it probably bears mentioning, the time in Windows is just so critical. Two things are critical, especially if it relates to Windows updates or going to the Windows Store. Number one is activation. Okay? The system needs to be activated, so that was initially the problem. And then number two, it's the time. And it sounds odd, but my time was set correctly. The actual time was set correctly for being in the Eastern time zone, only that the clock was set in the Pacific time zone, but with the Eastern time. And so just a little 3-hour difference there, and it freaked out and just kept closing the Microsoft or the Windows Store. But this is a good example of, the record of these errors. And these are the things that have happened. And some of them, maybe more or less of an issue. My informational events are successful Windows updates, successful application installations. I don't have any operating system crashes. Okay, so no Windows failures are listed here, but I do have some application failures. And for each of them, you can view the details, and some of them you will be able to check for a solution. Okay, and there's your problem reports and solutions. It goes out and checks. If they are available, then they're going to show up. You'll be notified over here that there was a solution to a problem that you had. And so it said in the security and maintenance area. So this action center is going to list that information for you. Okay, we've got the memory diagnostics utility. I'm going to open this up. We're not going to run it because you actually have to restart the computer to be able to do it. So it's also fairly uneventful. You know, it's a useful tool if you think you're having memory problems. And if you have an application that continues to crash or the operating system that's crashing, then you might very well have a memory problem. I mean, you could just replace the memory, or you could run the memory diagnostic to see if it can identify which chip is bad. Sometimes we have more than one chip. So you can check it the next time I start the computer, or I can restart now and check for problems. Okay? And then, of course, the network diagnostics is going to be found in the Network and Sharing Center. When you go into troubleshoot problems, you've got, these are all technically network diagnostics. So diagnostics on internet connections, on network adapter, incoming connections, connections having to do with a work group or direct access. So just make sure we realize that not every problem, even if it's perceived that it's a performance-related problem, is so. It might be a reliability problem. And we've got one more tool to go through, and that is going to be Event Viewer, a very useful tool for monitoring and troubleshooting the system. Event Viewer has been around in Windows for as long as I can remember, all the way back to Windows NT, I believe, as the primary location to view all the activity on the system. And so that means it's a primary stop when you're troubleshooting issues. It is your way of knowing what is happening on the system and what has happened. Often with troubleshooting methodology, you know, we start with asking questions. We're trying to get, if a user's having a problem, we're trying to get as much information about the problem as we can so we can hopefully identify the root cause of the issue, and then we can address it and come up with an action plan, implement the action plan, and document our findings. But sometimes the user doesn't give us a whole lot of helpful information. You know, there was an error message, but they don't remember what it said, and they just closed it. You know, things like that happen, and because of it, it's a little difficult to get information. Well, thankfully, Event Viewer is there, because regardless of if the user remembers the error message or not, wrote everything down or not, unlikely, you can go into Event Viewer and you can see exactly what happened. So Event Viewer in Windows 10, almost identical to what it was in the previous versions. In fact, I don't know that I've found any changes yet. It is a categorized view using applications and services logs. You've got the system logs we'll see, and then we've got a categorized view of various Windows components. Makes it a little bit easier to find things. Custom views and filters can be used to sort through the information that is there, because there is a lot of information. We can set up notifications of events. We can subscribe and pull events from a remote computer using the Remote Event Log Management Service. And we can view logs on remote computers. And as we saw in the PowerShell intro, we can use the get event log commandlet and access all this via PowerShell. So a very important utility, and let's go take a look just so that we're all familiar with it and can use it in troubleshooting. All right, so let's launch Event Viewer. We've got that. We've also got the view event logs action in the control panel, which is going to do the exact same thing. Okay, so that's a task. Event Viewer is in your administrative tools, but you can open it up that way. So we've got custom views first, and there's going to be a couple in there, and that's really just related to things I have installed on the system. Some administrative tools will add their own custom views in. The Windows logs is your primary location, and the primary two logs here are the application and the system log. The application log has events registered by applications on the system. They come in three types: information, warning, and error. I guess there is a fourth type that's critical. But information, warning, and error. Information is a positive. This is just something that's happened. An application started, or an application shut down, or it made a network connection, performed a successful synchronization, something like that. Okay. A warning is impending danger. An error, something has occurred. There was an error per se, but it's not, the application is still functioning. Sometimes there's a threshold. This warning can occur so many times before it actually becomes an error. And most of the time it's just related to the actual severity of the problem. An error is, an application crashed, an application wouldn't start, a DLL wasn't found, a sync couldn't be completed. Those kinds of things are errors. And we can see all three of them here. If we double click on an event, then it opens up, gives me some information about the event. Double click on a warning here. There we have a process that wasn't responding to the search service, and so that it shut down the process. Over here, an activation failed for one of my applications. Okay, who knows why? That's an error. If that's the same error down here and the same error here. So we got the same error, and you can identify that by the number too. The same error that's occurred 3 times. It has to do with the Microsoft Photos application, and so maybe that's something that I need to go check out. And it looks like we might have that all the time. And actually, now that I'm seeing this, I know what this is about. This actually came because the photos were synchronizing, but for some reason that photo that's showing up in the app in the live tile is not actually on my computer. So every time I clicked it, it would close Photos because it couldn't find it. It's a bizarre error. So, is it an error? Yes. What's the severity of it? Well, it's not that big of a deal. It was just that particular photo couldn't be found. And here it just says the specified module could not be found. It also tells me where to go, an operational log, if I want more information. So, I'm directed to a place down here in Windows, Microsoft Windows, and then I'd go down to the Twin UI. There's a ton of stuff in here. I'd go down and I would attempt to find that log, which is interesting because I don't actually see that log listed there. And I could then hunt down, the operational events there, or for that particular problem. The system log is going to have events related to the operating system. This is usually a little bit more critical stuff. If you have errors in here, you really need to get them addressed, figure out what they are. So for each of these events, it's going to tell you what the source is, what the event ID is. That can be useful for research. The type of event, if it's related to a particular user account, it'll tell you what that is. And that all of that information is going to be useful for research purposes. When you get down in here to Microsoft Windows under Applications and Services, it looks somewhat mind-boggling because there are so many different categories, but this actually does make things a little easier because it's already categorizing all of the errors. So if you were having a problem, say with BitLocker, well, there you go. There's 2 categories related to BitLocker. And so you can click on that and you can see information about BitLocker. Okay? This was a protector key was created, started the volume encryption on E. This is probably when I tried to, okay, I'm sorry, that was, remember I got an error on trying to synchronize it with my Microsoft account, and so I could maybe, if I wanted more information on that, then I could do a lookup on that event ID and see what some of the reasons. It tells me access is denied and that I hadn't been granted those rights. So maybe just, it's an option that has to be turned on for my account. So, but my point is simply that it is categorizing all of the different components in here and actually making it a little bit easier to look up things and to see where stuff is at and get more information. Okay? On the backup to the system logs, we can create custom views. When we create a custom view, we can choose, I want a custom view that looks at a couple of different logs, maybe, application and system, and I want to just look at anything, any warning and error messages. So I say, okay, give it a name,
and then it goes up in the custom view, and then it's a quick snapshot. The nice thing about a view is it can extend, I should say, across multiple logs. A filter is just within the current log, and that can be done over here. We filter the current view or filter the current log, and we get the same screen. If we only want to look for a particular event ID, if we only want to look for a particular source, that can be useful. But the filter is just created and then removed. You know, the views stick around, and they're a place where I can always go and see that information. With each event, you can right-click and say you want to attach a task to the event. Basically, if this event occurs, then I want to be notified, and this is what I want to do. Start a program, send an email, display a message. Send an email, it said deprecated in 8.1 as well. It didn't go away, it's still there. That, to me, is probably the most useful. You know, I wouldn't do that on information events, but if you had an error event that was occurring, you think you fixed the problem, but you want to know if it occurs again, you know, so that you can address it immediately, then you can attach a task to that event. You just plug in who it's going to, who it's supposed to come from, information in the message that's going to be meaningful to you, maybe attach the event or a log file, and specify the server that it's going to be sent through. If we go to forwarded events, then I can, well, actually, if I go to, this would be the location of the log, sorry. If I go to subscriptions, start the event collector service, I can create a new subscription. And when I create a new subscription, it's actually allowing me to pull logs from another system. I'll pull the logs from that system, they'll be deposited into the forwarded events log, and I can view them there. So that's very beneficial. It's centralized monitoring. Okay, so you can set up that reusable subscription if you want. Now, mind you, you can always just right-click up here and connect to another computer. So if you want to view somebody's event log, you can just go view the event log. You don't necessarily have to be pulling the information locally. But if you would like to collect it locally, that option is going to be available to you. Okay? So I think those are all the, the things that we need to talk about in Event Viewer. As I said, it is probably the first place we're going to go in order to just see what's happening on the system, what errors led up to the problem that a user is having. And so it's an extremely useful first stop for troubleshooting.